All right, guys, what a great Saturday of football yesterday to get week 1 kicked off. Couple upsets, couple really good games. We'll dive into the LSU Clemson game first, where the LSU Tigers went to Clemson, pulled off a 17-10 win at Clemson at Death Valley Junior. So when I look at that game, what stuck out to me the most was the LSU defense. Everything from the scheme, the execution, the way they played, everything was impressive about the defense. First thing that sticks out to me, PJ Woodland getting the first sack for the Tigers. If you would have asked me before the game to name top 10 players to potentially get the first sack for the Tigers, PJ Woodland would not have been in that top 10 list. That just shows you how deep this Tiger defense is. But switching over to the offense, quite a few penalties in the first half there. Never really got the ball rolling. But LSU found a way to pull out the win at the end. So I'm going to give one more point, with that being within the first quarter. There were 4 timeouts taken in last night's game, 2 by each team. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that in a top 10 matchup. Yeah, defense is going to be really strong for the Tigers this year. What did you guys think?
Defensively last night, linebacker did a great job of scheming, putting the guys in good positions to make plays. Did a great job s- uh, s- doing the scheming all the defensive front with the linebackers and the defensive ends and tackles, stunt and stuff. It worked out really well, and the DBs were outstanding. Delane was unbelievable. Halsey, when he came in the second half, was awesome. Starting Gilbert had a good night. I just said Wilson getting that first sack. Everybody contributed. It was really nice to see it. It reminded us of the defensive passion in 2003, 2007, 2011. They've got a talent to do something special this year.
Yeah, and we certainly know what happened in that 03, 07, and 11 season. LSU won 2 national titles and played for a third. Kevin, you were at the game. Give us your insight being there live in Clemson in front of 102. I don't know, I mean 80,000 fans.
That's
Remember,
right,
they were
80,000. But
junior,
now look,
junior.
let's give them credit. They were in their seats 30 minutes before the game. They were not a late arriving crowd. Very, very, I'll say this about their fans, very professional. It was a nice atmosphere. It was not a hostile environment. There were moments they got loud. Once the game was tied at 3, it kind of settled. And it was kind of like they were waiting for something good to happen. They didn't get a lot of good offense to get the crowd going. But it was a great atmosphere as far as just a nice place to watch a game. All the LSU fans were in the upper deck. That was not a fun experience, and that was a very steep upper deck. Great view of the river that runs along beside the stadium. And they had a really nice drone show that took the fourth quarter. So I'll say that about the stadium. But if anybody was ever considering going to Clemson, I would tell you go watch a game. What impressed me was, number one, I go with Mansur Delane. To me, he took one receiver out of the game pretty much every play. He played man coverage and he played it well. He he kept the receiver. He didn't give up the inside. He forced the receiver to the sideline. He was the best player on the field for either team last night, and it was just play after play after play. He had a couple pass breakups. He had an interception, and then there were times they might look and throw at his guy, but he had him covered. So again, Klubnik would have to run out of the pocket. I give Woodland credit because he played well. We heard he did well in fall camp, but everybody kind of thought Stamps might start. But the secondary was DBU last night. They were really, really fun to watch. The other thing I liked about our defense was the second half, the changes that Baker made at halftime. The first half, we played well defensively. We only gave up 110 yards, I think it was, in the first half. But the one drive they scored a touchdown on, we were bringing pressure from the ends, and Klubnik got outside a couple times and ran the ball for a couple first downs, probably 25, 30 yards total in those 2 plays. In the second half, Baker kept his ends outside, and we delayed blitz and blitz with their linebackers up the middle, whether it be Keys, Weeks, Perkins, West Weeks, Whit Weeks. We brought pressure up the middle, and we did flush him, and he never got comfortable in the pocket. But he would run. He wanted to get outside and run the ball and maybe even cut it upfield. But the ends were there, and they just ran along with him. And with the speed we have at ends, he just had to throw the ball away. The defense was a story. 9 3 and outs if you count the field goal that they got after our turnover. 22 minutes of possession, 58 plays, only averaged 4.3 yards a play. Our defense just owned that game yesterday. And to me, I just want to give the, the credit to them. Baker did a great job. Corey Raymond in the secondary was awesome. It was the old school DBU. Fun to watch. I love to watch good defensive back play. So I just enjoyed that aspect of the game and how we controlled the game. The game very easily could have been 27-10. A touchdown that they somehow overturned. Take that 3 points at the end of the first half. It's a 27-10 game, and it's really not even that close. And the stats bore that out too. We don't have to get into all that, but great win for LSU. Great road win. Clean up some offense, and we'll get better.
Yeah, probably the most controversial overturn I've ever seen with that Berrien Brown touchdown there. At worst, I thought he was going to be out of bounds at the half-yard line, most likely a touchdown. Somehow it's ruled an incomplete pass. This is probably a play that I don't think there will ever be clarity on why that call was made. And I don't know an expert that's given an opinion yet that understands it either, how it
No,
could have been called
I,
incomplete.
I hope that Woodward was up first bright and early this morning and firing off an email to the offensive man, because there was no question, there's no explanation for that. It was just a missed call. With what's at stake, that could have ruined the season if LSU gets that call overturned and ends up losing the game because of that. That can be the difference between making the playoff and not making the playoff. So when there's a lot right on it like that, that's why you have replay. And when you have replay and you still miss the call, somebody needs to answer for it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm never one to complain about penalties that should or shouldn't have been called in a game. Yeah, there's going to be missed calls like that, but with a touchdown review like that, I don't know how that could be the outcome. But at the end of the day, the Tigers got a win. Aaron Anderson looked really good at wide receiver in the second half. I do want to give a shout out to Kyle Parker, who came up big for us on that third down to pick up that first down at, like the 5 yard line, 7 yard line, somewhere like that. That was a really big play and, really good to see how much depth we have that we can throw the ball to this season.
The,
I was a little worried about our running back room last week, but, I think Xavion Thomas is going to see a little more time in the backfield. Juwan Johnson, Harlem Berry. Right now, Caleb Jackson's kind of the odd man out in the LSU running back room, in my opinion.
I think so. I want to go back to you mentioned that Berrien Brown pass that he caught, and I just want to hit on Nuss for a second here. That was a stretch from the beginning of the second half till we got into the fourth quarter where Nuss was the best player on the field. He like that pass, he dropped that in a bucket, 55-yard pass that just dropped perfectly in the bucket over the shoulder. And then you mentioned Anderson. Anderson ran about a 15 to 20-yard in route that Nuss threw between the cornerbacks and the safeties with perfect timing, very similar to the pass that he threw to tie the Ole Miss game last year. Just perfect timing that he had to throw Anderson open. That when he let go of the ball, it was as Anderson was making his cut, and he threw it right. Just right in a window. So Garrett he played really well. He had a couple times they flushed him out of the pocket in that same period of the game that he looked and found guys coming from the backside, crossing over the middle. And then, with that inside screen pass he threw to Anderson, Anderson turned upfield and got a lot of yardage. It was just really fun to watch Garrett come out the start of that second half when we had to have somebody step up offensively. And him and Anderson got in a connection, but Garrett really, really played well and got our offense going when we had to have it.
Yeah,
and
another
guys,
good pass by Garrett. That Bauer sharp play down the sideline. I know Bauer couldn't get the foot down; he was hit in the air, but that was a beautiful
Yes, it
pass.
was.
Only he put it only where his guy could make the play, and we didn't get that one down. But yeah, the way, and Garrett wasn't bad in the first half by
No.
any means, but we opened it up a little more for him in the second half. And, the stat line's not crazy. What did he finish with? Like 230 yards last night, but the execution was phenomenal. 28 at 38. Really good game for Garrett. And next week he'll probably throw for 5 or 6 touchdowns and get the average back up. But yeah, Garrett's gonna have a great season, and the offense will continue to develop, and yeah, defense will lead the way for the Tigers this year, as good as the offense is.
And guys, before we go to the next game, we gotta give a ton of credit to the offensive line as a whole. That was the biggest question mark coming into the game, and there's still some holes there. I mean, obviously we don't have a lot of depth there, but to be able to keep Nuss clean all night long to open up some holes, that I didn't necessarily agree with the scheme and a lot of play calls that Sloan made or didn't make. The offensive line held up its end of the bargain and did a great job for Nutsmeyer in the back. So kudos to Davis and Atkins for getting those boys ready, and kudos to the players for coming out and strapping it on and doing a great job against a really good Clemson defense last night.
Yeah, I agree. And as LSU's got a lot ahead of them. Going to be a really good season. Let's flip the script to a team that kind of fell apart yesterday, and the Alabama Crimson Tide playing the Florida State Seminoles, end up falling 31-17. Very rarely do you see a quarterback, and Florida State's quarterback, made a comment about, Alabama doesn't have Nick Saban anymore. They can't stop me. And he backed it up yesterday. He reminded me of like a Diego Pavia type of player yesterday. They only threw the ball 14 times for 152 yards, but Castellanos ran for 78 and a touchdown. They just really, really outdueled the Crimson Tide yesterday. It came out with a win and stormed the field. What did you guys think of the Alabama game?
This Florida State came out, punched them in the mouth, and kept punching them in the mouth. State was the bully yesterday, and Bama didn't know what to do. So this is like what I read a stat last night where Nick Saban was 131-2 in his career at Alabama on games that they were favored by 14 or more. 131-2. Okay, Canada DeBoer is 4-4 in games where Alabama is favored by 14 or more, and he's only been there for one season and one game. The house of cards is coming tumbling down there in Tuscaloosa, and the fans are upset, have every right to be, because they didn't adjust. And we had talked about it last week when we were picking the games, Alabama and FSU, and I told you guys, because I know Castellanos from Ware County here in Georgia, I know that he's a dual threat kid, and Malzahn actually recruited him to Central Florida when he was the head coach there. Then he left and went to Boston College for a few years, but reunited with Malzahn at Florida State. So bringing those two back together, that's the type of quarterback that Malzahn does well with. The dual threat, the Cam Newton type. Now, obviously, Castellanos isn't a Newton type because he's about 8 inches shorter and 50, 60 pounds lighter. But the kid can extend plays with his feet, keeps his eyes downfield, and he did a great job of leading Florida State to a win yesterday.
So I just look at the game and then look at the stats, and the stats, sometimes stats can kind of cloud a game, but to me, they totally support what happened yesterday. Florida State ran for 230 yards, and that was losing yardage the last couple of plays. So really closer to 240 yards against Bama. So just the physicalness of Florida State against Bama, and that's just not what we've seen out of Alabama for the last 15 years. Saban might have given up 230 yards rushing. I know at Georgia Southern game when they ran the wishbone, he gave up some. He might have done that once or twice, but I'm telling you right now, Saban didn't give up over 200 yards rushing more than 5 times in 15, 16 years at Alabama. And they did, yesterday. So,
Yeah.
That just it just there's just opportunity there for the physically. They got to get better, and they got to, I don't know, it's going to be interesting. When we did the preview, we talked about Alabama, DeBoer on the road, and how they're going to play, And so I just still think those question marks are there. I still think they have a high floor. I said 9-3 at the beginning of the season. Maybe it's 8-4 now. I don't think they go worse than that. They're going to win a lot of games. Just Simpson started out 7 out of 8 and ended up 23 out of 43. So, you take that. That means he was like 17 out of his last, almost 20. So he just 17 out of 35. So less than 50% after the first quarter passing, which again, his career, he's about a 55% passer, which is what he ended up yesterday. And when the things started going south for them in that second half, he really looked, he really looked like he lost his confidence. So it'll be interesting to see how they bounce back. They're going to win some games. It's not over for them by no means, but they got a tough schedule. They got to go to Georgia. Anything in the SEC is tough. They still got LSU at home. They got to go to South Carolina. I mean, after that game yesterday, they got to go to Missouri. And I don't think if you're playing a good team on the road, I don't think you can count that as an absolute win for Alabama anymore. That being said, I still think they go 8-4. But just the physicalness of the game, that was the thing to me.
Yeah, and 8-4 doesn't keep you a job at Alabama. So
no, but that $50 to $60 million buyout, I mean, what do you do?
Yeah, that's, I don't know if he's done after this year, but yeah, the seat's definitely getting a little closer to the fire after last night. I don't
Sure.
think it's not hot yet, but it's at least a little lukewarm right now.
And what about Norville? Did he jump off the hot seat with that win yesterday?
Yeah, I don't know how a coach stays on the hot seat when your team's storming the field in week 1 or when your fans are.
It's been quite a ride. What was he, 14-1 and then 2-10 and now 1-0 with a win over Alabama? That's as bumpy a roller coaster as you could possibly have.
He rebuilt it. They were in a bad spot. He had 2 great years back to back. Really bad year last year. So obviously he couldn't have another 2-10. But I think he's fine. He's a good coach. I think he's fine.
And then you move on to the Ohio State-Texas game last night or yesterday morning. Ohio State wins at home 14-7 over the Longhorns. The Arch Manning is QB1. Future did not get off to as great of a start as Texas would have liked. He was 17 of 30, 170 yards with a touchdown and an interception. I'm not putting a lot of blame on Arch for that game. Yeah, they ran a really conservative offense for about 3/4 of the game, in my opinion, watching it. You never really allowed him to really get his timing down throughout the game, but at the end of the day, Texas did not want to start off 0-1. Credit to Ohio State, though. Patricia, the new DC over there, kind of had the Texas O-line shook for a lot of the game. Yeah, they were getting after Arch a little bit and really, had some success against the run overall against Texas. I know Texas still averaged 4.5 yards a carry, ran for 166, but Baxter and Wisner were stopped, at the line quite a bit too. They'd pop off some big runs and then be stopped. So really, what stuck out the most is that Ohio State defense for me yesterday in that game.
Yeah, the T-Sippers didn't look all that impressive on the offensive side of the ball yesterday. And yesterday marked the first time that a number 1 ranked team lost their season opener in 35 years. For Texas to bestow that favor upon the college football world is good for them. Good job, Texas. I think Texas, obviously, they're going to be in it still. Losing at Ohio State, losing in the shoe to the defending national champion is, that's not anything that's going to totally destroy the season. They've still got all their goals in front of them. That being said, offensively, 7 points isn't going to get it done. I don't know. I didn't watch the whole game, so I can't speak much on how they schemed for Orange in that game. But if they ran the ball for 166 yards, like we said, they did have some success up front. So if you guys watched the game, what was their passing attack?
Yeah, they really didn't get the passing game moving till the second half. They really leaned heavily in the first half on the run game, and I was surprised. I think Arch, I'd have to look at the numbers, but I think he only attempted like 11 passes in the first half. So they really depended on the run game. And Texas's defense is going to be strong this year. It felt like from a scheme standpoint, the entire game they were playing more not to lose than to win the game. That fourth quarter is when they started to have some success and they kind of aired the ball out a lot more. And Texas had a chance late to go down and tie the game off. Didn't convert on a fourth down. Pass was dropped. Not a perfect pass by any means either, but yeah, they were right there in it until the 2 minute mark or minute 40 mark of the game. I still think that, they're probably a 10-2 team and get into the playoff, possibly 9-3. And at 9-3, if your losses are, to top 10 teams, you're probably still on that borderline to get in.
I'd
I
agree.
think. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say if Texas is 10-2, they're getting in the playoff.
Yeah, I think this game is kind of what this weekend has kind of told us. And it was a competitive game defensively. Both teams are early in their season, and both teams are going to be much improved when we get to week 10. Both offenses struggled. The defenses were ahead of them. New quarterbacks. And I think you take that just kind of with what this first weekend gave us. So I don't think there's a number one team in the country right now. I think there's 5 teams right now that are pretty good. And I would put LSU, Georgia, Ohio State, maybe still Texas in that group. And let's watch Notre Dame and Miami tonight. I think Miami wins that. But if Notre Dame wins that game, you have to put them in that group. Then I think, there's a next group that Clemson, Alabama that could still have good seasons. Maybe it's a Texas A&M. There's several teams in that next 10 or in that 15. So I guess where I'm going with that, to the point I'm trying to make, is the teams that improve a lot right now between the next 3 to 4 weeks and then continue to improve a little bit each week are going to be the teams that emerge and make the playoffs and play in the conference championships. I don't think there's a dominant team right now. So again, I just think that's kind of what this weekend showed us, is that we have a lot of good teams. We have a lot of talented teams. We have 5 that stand out probably above the others. And then we have another 10 that could be in that top 10 race within that. I didn't mention Penn State, and they might be in there. Again, I'd like to see them play somebody well. And Oregon might be in that group too. So maybe it's 5 or 7 and then the next 10. And I just think that's kind of what this game showed us yesterday. It was surprising to me that both quarterbacks struggled the way they did passing the ball. I was not surprised to see both defenses play well from that perspective.
Yeah. And let's go over to the Tennessee Syracuse game. That was another 11 a.m. game yesterday. And, Tennessee won 45-26. And, if I'm talking about buying stock in an SEC quarterback, Joey Aguilar is the name that comes to mind right now, who wasn't in, the top 5 conversation. He's a guy who looked pretty good yesterday, 16 of 28, 247 yards, 3 touchdowns. It's pretty apparent to me that if Tennessee did one thing this offseason, it was upgrade the quarterback position. After watching UCLA late night last night, Tennessee, everything worked out the way it should for them after, watching Tennessee play and UCLA play yesterday. What did you think of that game, Sweets?
Yeah, being my wife is the Tennessee alum. In-laws are Tennessee alums. So we watch a lot of Tennessee football here at the house. Tennessee looked great yesterday. Listen, Aguilar was everything that Nico was supposed to be last year. He was able to throw the ball downfield with accuracy. He was able to extend plays with his feet. He did everything that they could ask for him. I don't think he could have had a better debut. He couldn't have scripted it any better. And then to come back and watch Nico Iamaleava get just curb stomped by the running Utes last night was kind of the cherry on the top of that volunteer Sunday. Looking forward to this next week. Tennessee's that got a gimme. I can't remember who it is. Austin Pierce, somebody like that. But then 2 weeks after that, Georgia comes down. That should be a heck of a game there. If Aguilar gets his sea legs on him, has another good game next week, that could be one that game day shows up at and stuff. I could see that being a really good game.
I thought Tennessee was better than what we anticipated. Really good defensively, and then Syracuse had a good offensive series, couple series in the fourth quarter to get back in the game. But Tennessee held them to 10 points up, deep into the third quarter. So I think Tennessee was, what we expected on defense, but their offense was much better than we expected. Aguilera was better than we thought he was going to be, even probably what we thought his upside might be. He was really good, and their running game was really good, dominant. No surprise there because they always are. Physical at the line of scrimmage, tailbacks. I don't care who you plug in there. They're going to run the ball and they're going to get their yardage there. Again, a lot of that goes to the way they design their offense, and you cannot put people in the box on them. So, a great win for Tennessee.
Yeah, and then just a few notes from the rest of the SEC. Georgia won 45-7 over Marshall. Gunnar Stockton, 190 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, but also added 73 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Pretty much what I expected Georgia to go out and do, win with ease week 1. And then you move over to Florida, Long Island, kind of the same thing. Florida wins 55-0. DJ Lagway had a pretty good game passing, 15-18 for 3 touchdowns. He only played about half the game because they had such a large lead. Aiden Ball had 100 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Moving on to Oklahoma, Illinois State. John Mateer had a pretty efficient game, 392 yards, 3 touchdowns, 30-37. He even added, another touchdown and 24 yards on the ground as well. So, good showing for Oklahoma to win 35-3. Texas A&M beat UTSA 42-24. That was a much closer game at halftime. It was 21-10 at half. Marcel Reed had a good game, 289 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. KC Conception had 72 yards and a touchdown and also ran a punt back yesterday for them. Then you move on to few of the other games with Ole Miss and Georgia State. Ole Miss won 63-7. Austin Simmons, 341 yards, 3 touchdowns passing. Kentucky found a way to beat Toledo. It was never pretty for them. They're going to really have to lean on the run game all season. And, they ran for 221 yards, a little over 5 yards of carry. Dowdell had 129 yards and a touchdown. Calzada had a touchdown on the ground, and McGowan 78 yards with a touchdown. A game that I watched really closely was Mississippi State and Southern Miss. That game was 13-10 game at halftime. State ended up pulling away 34-17. But if there's a quarterback that I would sell in the SEC right now, it would be Blake Shapen. The stats are a lot better than how that game really went. He was 26-34 for 270 yards, but man, a lot of that was busted coverage that they capitalized on. I had predicted State wouldn't win an SEC game all season, and I definitely think that even more after watching them against Southern Miss. Then you had Arkansas beat Alabama A&M 52-7. Big game for them to put some points up. And then Vanderbilt closed out the night, beating Charleston Southern 45-3. Pavia had 75 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. All of those games were, games we expected SEC teams to win big. Not a lot to say on any of those. Yeah, looking forward to week 2. Could be a really good week coming up. LSU's playing Louisiana Tech, so not an extremely exciting game, but we should see the offense open up for the Tigers a little bit more there.
Yeah, I think week 2 in the SEC is survive and advancement. I don't know if there are any big games on the schedule. I was just taking a peek at next week's schedule. There are some really good games the following week. But next week, let me take a peek here. I'm not seeing anything that jumps off the page here.
We have Michigan, Oklahoma next week. That's a game that I
Okay,
really
all right.
yeah, that's a game that I really want to watch. I think that'll be a good game. And look, the SEC took one on the chin to the Big Ten this week. So as much as I'm not rooting for Oklahoma, they need a win for the SEC. Split with the ACC with LSU winning and Bama taking a loss. So there's that. But again, every week is going to be fun and interesting. I think there's even a conference game or two next week.
Yeah, you've got Ole Miss and Kentucky playing. You've got
Yes.
Kansas and Missouri. You've got South Florida playing Florida, which Florida could be overlooking that with a week 3 matchup against LSU. And then you do have Mississippi State and Arizona State. Arizona State's traveling to Stark Vegas that week. And then you've got Vanderbilt and Virginia Tech. And watching the Carolina game right now. Virginia Tech's hanging in that one, so that'll be an interesting game. I know we'll cover all of those in depth this week too. Yeah, so big slate upcoming next week. Not as many top 10 matchups by any means, but still some really good football, and we get our first SEC matchup of the season.
Well, I'm
And
going to
and
go out here and say, when we picked games and we did the previews, we all felt like Ole Miss would go to Kentucky and win that game handily. Simmons had 2 interceptions yesterday, and in the fall camp, just kind of struggled with throwing the interceptions. I'm going to back up here. Ole Miss may win that game, but I think Kentucky's going to be in that game. I think that's a game that's going to be decided in the fourth quarter at this point. I think that'll be a really good game to watch next week. They're 3:30 Eastern ABC game, so that's your middle afternoon game. I like that game. And then another out of conference battle is Kansas and Missouri. For those that don't understand that rivalry, that is Auburn and Alabama for that part of the country. Those schools go way back in the Big Eight and they don't like each other. That is a border rivalry. And so that game is going to be played with a lot of passion. And Kansas had a good win week 1. So I think that'll be a really interesting game for both of those teams. I expect that game to be a dogfight into the fourth quarter. Already mentioned Michigan and Oklahoma. So I think we got some good games to look forward to next week.
I do too. That Kentucky Ole Miss line is 10 right now. Um, it's kind of surprising. I thought Ole Miss would be favored by a couple of touchdowns. So maybe Vegas is thinking like you are, Kevin, that Kentucky's going to hang around and make this game a lot closer than many people think they are. It won't surprise me because listen, it's not like Stoops forgot to coach overnight. He's a decent football coach, and he's a defensive guy too. So if he can scheme something up to slow the lane train down, and if Simmons is still having a propensity to throw the ball to teams in the opposite jerseys, then who knows? That game is at Kentucky too, so never know. These road games will come back and come back to bite you. Ask Alabama. Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
And you mentioned Arizona State, Mississippi State. Arizona State's one of the Big 12 favorites. Be an interesting game. The night game in the SEC. So it's one that the Big 12 needs to win. And it's one that Mississippi State, if they have any hopes to make a bowl game, they need to win. Interesting game.
Yeah, definitely.
There's going to be some good ones next week for for a lot of teams here at LSU's Texas. You just want to keep everybody healthy. That game against Florida on 13th. We don't want to look ahead. Stranger comes as pattern, but that one is that's going to have a lot riding on it for a week 3 game.
Yeah, definitely. So if you're listening to this episode, be sure to tune in this week and we'll have a full breakdown of all these games for the week 2 slate in the next couple days. So that's a wrap for Southern Sports Gumbo this week.